The storm arrived before dawn, dragging the Atlantic with it, an angry wall of water and wind that clawed its way up the cliffs of Camden, Maine. As lightning cracked across the sky, the Whitford house loomed in silhouette, its spired roof trembling, its windows shuddering as if in pain. It had endured hurricanes, blizzards, and decades of unspoken history, but this storm seemed determined to tear something loose, and in a way it did. Elias Whitford had not driven up the long gravel road in nearly 8 years, yet there he was at sunrise, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles whitened, the wipers battling sheets of rain. His mother had called him only once during the night, her voice thin, frayed, saying the roof had been damaged and she was afraid to go upstairs to check. She hadn't asked him to come. She never did. But Elias had heard what her words had avoided. The tremor, the hesitation, and beneath it, a memory he wished he'd left buried. When he stepped inside the house, the air smelled the same as it had when he was a boy. Pine cleaner, damp wood, and something faintly metallic. The storm had blown open several windows, scattering leaves across the hallway runner. The chandelier swayed as the house moaned under the pressure of wind. His mother sat in her armchair, wrapped in a wool blanket, staring not at him, but at the ceiling. "It's the attic," she whispered. "I heard something." Elias pretended not to hear that last part. Over the years, his mother had attributed strange noises to raccoons, faulty pipes, the shifting foundation, anything but what he feared she suspected, anything but what he himself had once heard as a child. The soft, patient creaking of footsteps above the ceiling boards. He grabbed a flashlight, though the morning was already brightening through the storm haze. The staircase to the attic was narrow and steep, its banister slick with moisture. As he climbed, a cold draft slipped down the steps, carrying the smell of wet insulation and something older, like fabric left too long in a closed trunk. At the top, he pushed open the attic door. It groaned as if resisting. The space beyond was half ruined, shingles scattered like broken shells, patches of sky visible through the torn open roof. Rainwater dripped steadily, forming shallow pools across the floorboards. But what caught Elias's breath was not the destruction. It was the unmistakable shape in the far corner. A mattress, sunken and discolored, still indented as though someone had recently been lying on it. His pulse stuttered. He stepped closer. A wool blanket lay folded with careful precision. Beside it, a stack of books, worn spines, pages softened from use, a metal cup, a tin plate. Clothing hung from a wire stretched across 2 beams, shirts mended by hand, socks darned so many times the original fabric had nearly vanished. On the wall, faint scratches formed what looked like tally marks, too many to count. Elias held the flashlight steady, though his hand trembled. The attic had always been forbidden. His father had insisted it was unsafe, claiming rotted beams and unstable flooring. Elias had believed him, or had forced himself to. Yet he remembered nights when he'd lain awake hearing a faint rhythm above him, a shifting, a presence. His father had always dismissed it. His mother had always gone quiet. He crouched beside the mattress. The blanket was still warm. The realization struck him with a physical jolt. Someone had been here, recently, during the storm, perhaps hours ago, perhaps minutes. A gust of wind ripped through the opening in the roof, scattering papers across the room. One sheet brushed against his leg. He lifted it. It was a drawing, charcoal on yellowed paper, of the Whitford house itself. Beautifully rendered, precise. But the perspective was from the attic window, as though someone had spent years studying the house from within its highest shadows. Behind him the floor creaked. Elias turned sharply, but saw only the swaying of a hanging shirt and the flutter of the broken roof tarp. Still, the feeling remained. An undeniable sense that the room was not empty, not truly. Something lingered. Something watched. He backed away, unease spreading through his chest. He needed answers. He needed to understand what his father had hidden here for 25 years. But as he reached the doorway, another sound drifted from the darkness. Soft, deliberate, almost human. A single breath. It was enough to make Elias freeze, just for a moment, as the storm outside quieted. Like the world itself was holding its inhale. Elias did not mention the breath he had heard. He told himself it could have been the wind slipping through the open roof, or the wooden frame settling after decades of pressure. But as he walked back down the attic stairs, each step seemed to pulse with a memory he had tried to bury. His father standing at the foot of these same stairs blocking the way, insisting there was nothing up there worth seeing. In the kitchen, his mother sat rigidly at the table, fingers curled around a mug she wasn't drinking from. The house creaked and hummed under the storm's fading weight. Elias poured himself coffee. When he finally looked at her, she was staring at him with an expression that was not surprise, not fear, something colder. "You found it, didn't you?" she asked. "Found what?" He kept his voice steady, though his heart had not yet slowed from what he'd seen, what he'd felt upstairs. Her thin lips pressed together. "Your father never meant for anyone to see that room." He pulled out a chair, but didn't sit. "Mother, someone has been living up there for a long time." She did not deny it. She only lowered her eyes, and the silence that followed was thick, old, and weighted with guilt. He waited, but she said nothing more. It was like watching a door close. A door that once opened would change everything. Elias stepped outside instead, needing air. The storm had passed, leaving the coastline bruised and glittering. Seaweed littered the lawn. The sky was a churn of gray and lavender. The house, tall and isolated against the cliff ridge, looked even more severe in the damp morning light. The kind of house that held secrets because it had nowhere else to put them. He made his way to the old storage shed. If someone had lived in the attic, supplies had to come from somewhere. Yet the shelves were nearly empty. No canned goods, no water containers. Only a few dusty jars of nails and a rusted toolbox remained. He scanned the floor. Footprints, small ones, led to the back door of the shed and out toward the tree line. Whoever had been hiding in the attic had left recently, possibly last night. A chill traveled up his spine, though the air was warming. Back inside the house, he walked into his father's old study. It had remained untouched since Henry Whitford's death 17 years earlier. Heavy oak desk, diplomas on the wall, leather-bound law books in perfect alignment. Dust coated everything in a thin, respectful layer. Elias approached the desk and began pulling open drawers. Paper clips, fountain pens, receipts from the 1950s, a pair of gloves. Nothing unusual, until he reached the bottom drawer. It resisted, stuck on something soft. He tugged harder. A bundle of letters slid forward. They were tied with twine, the paper yellowed, some edges damaged by moisture. No stamps, no envelopes, just pages filled with handwriting. Soft, looping, unmistakably feminine. He untied the twine with care, his breath shortening with each page he turned. "Henry," the first letter began, "you promised me a life. I gave you everything. Even when you asked me to stay hidden, I believed you had a plan." Another, "The child is quiet today. I fear the dust in the attic is harming him. Please let me come downstairs if only for an hour." Elias's hand trembled. "Child? Hidden?" The letters continued, each more urgent, more desperate. "If you love me, you will not let me vanish like this. The nights are colder now. The roof leaks. The boy is coughing. I hear your wife walking below. Does she know I am here? Does she know you promised to choose me?" The final letter in the bundle had a darker stain across the bottom, as though the ink had bled through tears. "If you do not bring medicine, he will not last the week." Elias pressed his fingers against his forehead. He felt the weight of something terrible shifting into place, a puzzle he had never known he was part of. His father, the respected attorney, the pillar of their small coastal town, had hidden a woman and a child in the attic. For how long? And what became of them? A soft thump came from overhead, not from the attic, from the second floor. Elias looked toward the staircase, pulse tightening. His mother remained in the kitchen, motionless. The house was too still, too alert, as if listening for his reaction. He set the letters down with care. Then he took a slow step toward the stairs. The air around him subtly colder, heavier, charged with a truth that was beginning to wake. At the top of the stairs, something moved, just out of sight, and the house, for the first time in years, seemed to breathe. Elias paused halfway up the staircase, listening. The second-floor hallway stretched before him in a dim line of faded wallpaper and warped floorboards, lit only by the weak daylight leaking through a cracked window. The house felt inhabited in a way it hadn't in decades, animated by a presence that had grown used to shadows, to silence, to watching. He took another step, each creak sounding unnervingly deliberate. His father's study door remained open behind him, the stack of letters untouched on the desk, like evidence awaiting judgment. Elias's childhood bedroom was ahead, the guest room beside it, and at the end of the hallway the narrow door that led to the attic stairs. He scanned each doorway, expecting, dreading, movement. Nothing. Still, the sense of being observed did not leave him. His childhood room smelled of dust and cedar. The curtains were drawn, the bed neatly made as if preserved for a son who had never truly belonged to the house. A faint indentation marked the rug near the window, as though someone had stood in that same spot for long stretches of time, looking out at the yard below. Elias crouched and pressed his fingers into the imprint. The carpet fibers were still warm. He straightened abruptly, heart thudding. Whoever had lived in the attic had not vanished into the storm. They had come downstairs. And recently. He checked the bathroom next. Towels untouched. Mirror fogged at the edges from years of moisture. A toothbrush lay on the counter, but it was his father's old one, stiff with age. No sign of the intruder, but the air carried the faint smell of soap. Not the brand his mother used. Moving quietly, he entered the guest room. The bedspread was rumpled, as if someone had pressed a hand there for balance. On the windowsill sat a small object he almost missed. A button, dark blue, chipped around the edges, with a thread still attached. Elias turned it over in his palm. It matched the shirts hung in the attic. He pocketed it, then descended the stairs again, compelled by something deeper than curiosity. His mother remained in the kitchen, sitting exactly where he had left her, staring at the clock. She didn't look up when he approached. "Mother," he said softly, "how long did Father keep them up there?" Her eyes fluttered, but she didn't speak. Who was she? A long silence. Then, without shifting her gaze from the clock, she whispered. Her name was Lillian Carter. The name landed heavily, as though the air itself stiffened around it. She worked as a seamstress in town, his mother continued. Your father met her after you were born. She was beautiful, different. He said he was helping her, that she had nowhere to go. Her fingers tightened around the mug. But helping turned into something else. Elias felt coldness slip beneath his skin. Was she forced to stay in the attic? Another long pause. His mother's lower lip trembled. Not at first. He promised he would leave us for her, that they would start anew somewhere far from Maine. But promises, they shift. Her eyes darkened. Especially when a man fears what people will say. Elias understood enough of the era to fill in the missing details. A biracial woman in the 1950s, in a small Maine town, involved with a prominent white attorney. It was the kind of scandal that destroyed reputations and lives. His father, proud and rigid, would never have risked whispers, and so he made a prison from his attic. Did you know about the child? Elias asked. His mother's face crumpled. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly. I heard him crying through the floorboards at night. A surge of anger rose in Elias's chest, toward his father, toward the house, toward the silence that had rotted through both. Why didn't you help them? Her eyes met his at last, hollow and rimmed with years of regret. Because your father told me if I ever interfered, he would take you away. And I believed him. Elias stepped back, shaken. The letters upstairs painted a grim picture. Illness, desperation, isolation. But one question burned hotter than the rest. What happened to Lillian and the child? He turned toward the living room, searching for more answers, when something caught his eye. The old hallway mirror, its silver backing tarnished. For a moment it reflected both him and the staircase behind him. But there was something else in the glass. A shadow, a form, a suggestion of someone standing just beyond the landing. He spun around. Nothing. Only the staircase, empty and silent, though the air carried a faint impression of movement, as if someone had stepped away an instant before he turned. The afternoon light dimmed as heavy clouds drifted inland, turning the house into a dim maze of shadowed corners and creaking floors. Elias returned to the attic with a steadiness that surprised him. Perhaps it was not courage, but a grim acceptance that the truth lived here, buried beneath insulation, dust, and the remnants of 2 stolen lives. The mattress remained where he had found it, the blanket still neatly folded. Yet now, with the letters in his mind, everything seemed charged with meaning. He knelt beside the wire where shirts hung, examining them more closely. The stitches were small, precise, clearly handmade. Lillian Carter had been a seamstress. She had passed the time stitching, mending, creating order inside a life that had been stripped of choice. Near the mattress, half hidden beneath a warped floorboard, Elias noticed a small wooden box. He pried it loose, dust puffing into the air. Inside lay a handful of objects: a child's wooden toy, carved in the shape of a whale, a lock of curled dark hair tied with thread, and a small notebook, its pages fragile with age. His pulse quickened. He opened the notebook. The handwriting was different from the letters, smaller, shakier, uncertain. A child's hand. Mama says the sea talks at night. I can hear it through the roof when it rains. Elias turned the page. Papa brought bread today. He didn't smile. Another. Mama is sick again. I wish I could open the window, but Papa says no one can know we are here. Each line chipped away at the version of his father he had grown up believing in. Henry Whitford, the stern but principled lawyer. Henry Whitford, the man who lectured on morality at the town hall. Henry Whitford, who had smiled at neighbors and played the role of dutiful husband, while hiding a woman and their child in his attic, like a shadow he refused to acknowledge. The entries grew more fragmented as the pages progressed. Mama coughs a lot. It hurts my ears. Papa hasn't come in 2 days. I'm scared of the cold. Elias's throat constricted. He closed the notebook, unwilling to see the final entry just yet. Instead, he looked around the attic, imagining Lillian pacing these wooden boards, holding her son close as she listened for footsteps that never came. Back downstairs, his mother remained at the table, as though rooted to it. Elias placed the wooden box before her. She flinched when she saw it. I found this in the attic, he said quietly. Mother, what happened to them? Her hand shook. I don't know everything. Your father kept me out of that part of his life. He told me it was better that way. That isn't an answer. She swallowed hard. One winter, must have been 58 or 59, your father came back from the attic looking different, pale. He washed his hands 3 times at the kitchen sink. I asked where Lillian was. She paused, rubbing her fingers against the grain of the table. He told me she was gone. Gone? Elias echoed. Gone where? He never said. But he boarded up the attic staircase a week later. Told me not to ask questions. I didn't see him bring down a body. Her voice quivered. Or a child. Elias felt a cold, sinking dread. Are you saying you think she died up there? His mother pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. I think she needed help, and he chose not to give it. A long silence swallowed the room. But the child? Elias asked, voice tight. What about him? Her eyes shone with something like fear. Your father never spoke of him again. The notebook upstairs seemed to tremble in Elias's pocket, as if the final entry were burning to be read. He turned toward the staircase again, driven by an unease that grew heavier with each second. He needed to know what happened. He needed to see the truth written in the child's final words. But before he could take the first step, a sudden crash echoed from the upper level, a sharp, violent sound of something falling hard to the floor. His mother gasped. Elias froze. The house settled into silence again, thick and watchful. Then came another sound, a soft, wavering cry. Not loud, not clear, but unmistakably human, and coming from the attic. The cry was faint, as if carried from a great distance, or from a memory the house itself refused to release. Elias stood motionless at the foot of the stairs, the air tightening around him. His mother clutched the edge of the table, whispering a prayer he had never heard from her lips before. The Whitford house, with its long corridors and shuttered windows, seemed to be inhaling, waiting. Elias forced himself to move. Each step up the staircase felt heavier than the last, as though climbing through layers of forgotten years. The second floor was dim, the storm light fading into an eerie twilight. He heard the cry again, a soft, broken sound that made his chest constrict. It came from the attic door. He reached it slowly. The door, already cracked from the storm's violence, hung crooked on its hinges. The moment he pushed it open, a draft swept past him, carrying the smell of damp wood, old fabric, and something else. Something like the trace of a moment that had never truly faded. Inside, the attic was darker now, shadows pooling under the beams. The fallen roof still gaped open, letting in a thin sliver of gray sky. And there, near the collapsed corner, lay the source of the noise. The small wooden whale from the box, rocking gently on its side as though it had just been touched. But the attic was empty. Elias stepped inside, scanning every corner. The mattress was undisturbed. The clothes still hung. The tally marks on the wall looked sharper, more defined, as if someone had traced them recently. He approached the mattress, then stopped abruptly, as something crunched beneath his foot. Glass. A broken picture frame. He bent down and lifted the photograph inside. It was spotted with water damage, but still visible. A young woman, Lillian, standing on a rocky shoreline, wind in her hair, a small boy at her side. The child looked no older than 5. His eyes were wide, luminous, almost hauntingly familiar. Elias's breath thinned. That face, those eyes, he had seen them before. In a mirror, in his own reflection. His father had lied about everything. Elias was not the only child Henry Whitford had claimed as his. He was the replacement, the one born into the legitimate world, while another was left in the shadows. A brother he never knew existed. A brother hidden, forgotten, erased. The notebook in his pocket suddenly felt unbearably heavy. He opened it to the final page. Papa says Mama is sleeping. She is cold. He closed the door and told me to be quiet. I am trying. I am trying. I wish Elias could hear me. Mama said he is my brother. She said he will find me one day. Elias staggered backward. The page blurred as tears rose, hot and disbelieving. He turned toward the far corner of the attic, where a section of boards looked newer than the rest. He approached slowly, dread blooming in his chest. The boards were nailed unevenly, hastily, a makeshift seal. He dug his fingers into the edges and pulled. The wood splintered, giving way with a groan. Behind it lay a narrow recess. Dust, fabric. Human remains curled in the position of someone who had tried until the last moment to stay warm. The bones were small, not an adult's. Elias sank to his knees. He covered his mouth with shaking hands as the truth washed over him with a quiet, devastating certainty. His father had not simply hidden Lillian and her child. He had abandoned them. And when illness or cold or despair had taken the boy, Henry had entombed him in the walls, sealing away the evidence of his cruelty. Elias felt the room tighten, as if the house itself were grieving. A shift of air brushed against his cheek, soft, like the echo of a breath, or a sigh. He looked toward the doorway. For just a moment, he thought he saw a small silhouette standing at the threshold. A boy, still and watchful, outlined in the gray light. But when he blinked, the figure was gone. Only the empty doorway remained, quiet and waiting. Elias stayed kneeling beside the recess, the storm clouds gathering once more above the broken roof. The house, exposed after 25 years of silence, seemed to whisper around him, lamenting, remembering, releasing. And far below, from the kitchen, his mother called his name, softly, as if afraid the house might answer instead. If this shocking story captivated you, don't forget to leave a comment, share your thoughts, and tell us what you think really happened in that attic. Make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video with someone who loves dark, hidden American history. Your support helps us bring more untold stories to light.